Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a chocolate pecan, or maybe you pronounce it pecan, pie, and this is what it looks like. This pie just has a bottom crust, and then it has like a custard-like filling, which is really sweet, and it's gooey, and it's full of chocolate and toasted pecans. Very nice. So we're going to start with our pastry. I like to make a butter pastry. For a really quick way to do it, you can use a food processor, which we're going to do here, or you can make it by hand. So you will need 1 1/4 cups, which is 175 grams of all-purpose or plain flour, and just a little bit of sugar, 1 tablespoon, 15 grams of granulated white sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. Now, if you were doing this by hand, just put it in a large bowl and use a wire whisk to mix all the ingredients together. I'm just going to pulse this, and that's it. And then, of course, for butter pastry, we need butter. So you will need 1/2 cup, 113 grams, and you want your butter to be cold. I mean, really cold. What I like to do is take my butter out maybe a half hour before I'm going to make my pastry, or you could do it the night before even, and cut it into these little small cubes, and then just put it on a plate, cover it with plastic wrap, and put it back into the fridge, or you could even put it in the freezer for faster, because you want the little cubes to be really cold. And that's what's going to give our pastry very light and like buttery crisp. So now if you're doing this by hand, then what you're going to do is cut your butter into your flour. You could use a pastry blender or 2 knives or even your fingertips. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to pulse this because I'm using the food processor, until we have coarse crumbs. Now if there's a few large pieces of butter, do not worry, that's okay. Going to check it. You should do this periodically because you don't want to over process it. Okay, that looks almost, I'm just going to check this. This is what you're looking for. If there's a few large pieces of butter, all the better. So that's that. And now we're going to just use some water to bind all of our ingredients together. Now you want, if you can see here, I've just got a glass full of ice cubes and water. You want that really cold. And you will need between 3 and 4 tablespoons normally. I mean, it's hard to say because different flours, depending on how it's stored, will absorb different amounts of water. So I usually start with 3 tablespoons. Because we can always add more, but you can't take away, right? And then you have to add more flour, and then that'll make your pastry a little tough. So what I'm doing is just sprinkling it over to the top. Now, if you were doing this by hand, then instead of processing, just toss your the mixture with a fork. And what we're looking for, we don't want a solid ball of dough. We just want it to start to come together, and then when we pinch it between our fingers, it will hold together. So I'm just going to pulse this for a bit. And then about at this stage, I find it starts to cling, some of it clings to the side of my bowl and then in the corners, so I just take a knife or you use a spatula. Loosen that. And I'm just going to check it. It's starting, but you can see it's still not, still a little dry. So I'm going to add just a little more water. Pulse a little more. Check it now. See, if you go like that, it clings together, so it's done. But as you can see, this is not a solid ball. It's just when you, that's how you know your pastry is ready. So now have a large piece of plastic wrap on your counter, because we're going to form this into a round, and we do have to chill it before we roll it out. So I'm just going to empty that. I'm going to empty it right on the plastic wrap. And then I use just my plastic wrap to bring the pastry together, because the less you handle your pastry, the better. So as you can see, it comes together very nicely. And then we're going to form it into a round. I like to do it into a fairly large circle because we have to roll it out. And the bigger your circle, the less rolling we have to do. So you can just use the plastic wrap to kind of smooth it out and into a round. And then I'm going to wrap this up and chill it for probably 30 to 60 minutes, just until it's firm enough that we can roll it out. So now we're ready to roll out our pastry. You will need a 9-inch, which is a 23-centimeter pie pan. I'm using metal. You could use glass or ceramic, whatever your favorite type is. And then I'm going to flour my surface so our pastry doesn't stick. And put it on there. A little flour on the top. And then I like to flour my rolling pin. And we're going to roll out our pastry to fit our pie pan. You will need to roll it in about a 13-inch, which is 33-centimeter round. Now always roll your pastry from the center outwards. Keep turning it as you roll. And if you find it cracks a bit, which may mean it's a little too cold, you could just take your rolling pin, bang like that, or just let it sit on your counter for a few minutes. Conversely, if it's really sticking, which may mean it's not cold enough, you could just, pop it back into the fridge. So if you have one of these bench scrapers, it's kind of good to help move your pastry around. Mine's a little cold today, although the granite will soften that up pretty quickly. Another way you can just check the size is to just take your pie pan and turn it upside down, and then you want like an inch or two around the outside, about 5 centimeters. It's not quite large enough, so I'm just going to roll that just a little more. And then if it's not round, you can just take your hand and just even it up. And always run your hand over your pastry to make sure it's an even thickness. Because we're rolling from the center outwards, it has a tendency to be a little thicker in the center. So if you just roll your hand, you can tell. I think that's about right. Edges are a little thick here. Okay, so now I'm going to transfer the pastry to my pie pan. I like to just use my roller so I just roll it up. Now, if you saw a lot of flour, you could just use your pastry brush or just your hand to rub that off. And then we're just going to unroll it. Now we want to be gentle when we're putting our pastry into our pan. We don't want to be pulling it, because then that's what causes your pastry to shrink as it bakes. So I just gently press it down into the corners, like so. If your pastry tears a little, don't worry, you can just patch it up as we go. No one will know but you. As you can see, I'm just kind of pressing it down into the corners there. And then you can take your finger here and just make sure. And then just press it over. Okay, so then I just press it down. If you find you have any cracking, then just take a little bit of pastry, like if on the bottom, you can just take a little pastry and press it in like that. That'll be just fine. Now, for this, what you can do if you want, if you like a really thick outside crust, then what you could do is tuck your overlapping pastry up under itself, and then you get a really thick. I'm going to show you how to. If you don't want to do that, then just take a sharp knife and cut off all the excess. Like so. And then, now you could take a fork and just press it all the way around to get a decorative. Or I'm going to take the 2 fingers and then this, and then I'm just going to go like this. Okay, that looks good. So now what I'm going to do is just cover this and put it back into the fridge because we want it nice and cold. And then when we come back, we will make our filling. But meanwhile, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. Now, and if you have an oven where you have a bottom element, put your oven rack in the lower third of the oven so that when the pie bakes, it'll get that cook the bottom crust. So now we'll start our pecan filling. The first thing we need to do is to toast our pecans because that brings out their really nice, like almost caramel flavor. So you will need 1.5 cups, which is 150 grams of pecans. You can use, for this part, you could use either chopped or you could use whole pecans, whatever you have. And so just put them on a baking sheet and pop them in your 350 degree Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius oven for about maybe 6 minutes, just until they get lightly brown. You can just start to smell them. And then let them cool and then just coarsely chop like I've done here. So, and then you will need to take 4 tablespoons, which is 55 grams of butter, and you need to melt that and then let it cool to room temperature. And then you will also need, because it's a chocolate pecan pie, you will need 2 ounces, which is 55 grams of, I'm using a semi-sweet chocolate. You could use a bittersweet as well. And you need to melt that and then let it cool to room temperature. Now, a couple ways you can melt it. You could just put it in a heat-proof bowl over a saucepan of simmering water, melt the chocolate that way. Or what I did, just because it's a small amount of chocolate, I did it in the microwave. But whenever you melt chocolate in the microwave, you got to be really careful because you don't want to overheat it. So do it in like, maybe 10, 15-second bursts. Take it out, stir it, and then put it back in, and because you don't want to overheat it. So then, a pecan filling, very rich, it's very sweet. So in a large bowl, you will need 3 large eggs and have those at room temperature. And then I'm just taking a wire whisk and break them up. And then I'm going to add to that 1/2 cup, that's 105 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar, and 1/2 cup, 100 grams of granulated white sugar. And then we're going to add, we need a little salt because that kind of brings out all the flavors. So just 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of salt. And this is a southern pie, so we're going to add some bourbon. 1 tablespoon of bourbon. Probably use a little more if you want. And I find that you could use rum too. It really kind of brings out all the flavors. It really adds to this pie. Now, if you don't want to use either bourbon or rum, you could add just 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Or if you don't want that, you can just leave it out altogether. And then I'm just whisking that. And then we're going to add even more sweetness. I said it was going to be sweet. 2/3 of a cup, which is 160 milliliters, or if you want to go by gram weight, 225 grams of, now there's a couple things here. You can use a light corn syrup, you could use a dark corn syrup, or I'm actually using a golden syrup. I like the flavor of golden syrup in this pie, but any of those choices would be excellent. And what I like to do when I'm measuring out any type of like really sticky thing like, you know, corn syrup, honey, molasses, is you can either spray the inside of your measuring cup with one of those non-stick sprays or even lightly oil it, and that way your corn syrup will come out much easier. And then we're going to add a little bit of cream, a quarter of a cup, 60 milliliters, whatever type of cream you have in the house. As you can see, this is really a custard filling. And then I'm just going to whisk that. And then we're going to add that butter that's cooled off. And our chocolate. As you can see here, really all I've done is taken the pecan recipe on the site and added some chocolate. And that's how you get a chocolate pecan pie. So really, if you didn't want the chocolate, you could just leave that out and you'd just have a regular pecan pie. And so then I'm going to add all of those lovely pecans. Okay. So that's our filling. So when we come back, we will assemble our pie and bake it off. Okay, so now our pastry has chilled. So what I've done is just put the pan on a larger baking pan just in case we have any spills. We don't want to get it into our oven, so then we have to clean it. And if you're like me, you don't like to do that. So then just pour your filling there. Oh, you smell the pecans and the chocolate. Okay, so that looks good. Now, it looks great like that to me. If you want, you can decorate a little. You could take some whole pecan halves and then just put them around if that's what you want to do. You know, maybe a dozen. Depends how fancy you want to get with your decorating. And then what we're going to do, put it in the oven and bake it somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes. You know, as always, everyone's oven is a little different, but what you're looking for is the filling will set. It almost will get a little bit of a crust on it. And when you shake it, though, it'll still wobble a little. You want it to not be quite set. And if you find during baking that the outside crust is over browning, then you could put a pie shield over it or just take some strips of foil and put it around there. But what you're looking for is the filling set with, and almost looks like a bit of a crust on it. Okay, our pecan pie is ready. So I'm putting the baking pan on a wire rack, and I did need the pie shield. I found like maybe about the last 10 minutes I needed to cover it because you don't want your crust to over brown. So now, just you can see it's set. It's almost like got like a crust. And if I shake the pan, you can see it still wobbles a little. So now what we want to do, of course, is we want to let it cool. I would say at least an hour or two so it has time to firm up, and when we come back we will cut a slice. So we're now ready to cut a slice. So just take a sharp knife. And remember, this is a very rich, it's very sweet. So you might want to cut your slices accordingly. There we go. Oh, whether you can see this. Really nice, like very thick custard-like filling. So we have the buttery crisp crust, and we have our filling. So I like the crust. Try. So good. You got the buttery crisp crust, and then you got those crunchy, kind of caramel-like tasting pecans, and the chocolate, and that custard, all sweet and gooey. So good. So the great thing is, if you were doing this for like Thanksgiving, Christmas, something like that, you could make this pie the day before. It's fine to sit overnight. And it's just so good. So try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyBaking.com.